People who believe in the paranormal, in ghosts, demons, angels and so on, what exactly happened that made you start believing in it? Sit back and we'll start. When I was a kid, I had an imaginary friend named Mr. Johnson. I could play and talk to him all day, and my parents mostly ignored it because it all seemed harmless to them. One day, when my mother was watering the yard, a neighbor passed by and started a conversation with her. He said that he was surprised that my mother decided to move into this house, because, according to him, there are ghosts there, and that the previous tenant died right in this house. His name was Mr. Johnson. After that, my parents became extremely uncomfortable when I was talking to my friend, and eventually I stopped communicating with him. I also have very vivid memories of talking to someone on a ledge in the same house. I can't remember what we were talking about, only that his voice was kind of hoarse and strange. When my dad came in and asked what I'm doing, I remember what my friend said: "Tell him I'm God." I told my father that I was talking to God. He gave me an excited look, which I found funny, although I had no real understanding of what God was or why it was strange to say such a thing. A few years ago, I was talking to my youngest son about his imaginary friend. He told me that his friend didn't like me at all. I asked if his friend was here right now. My son looked me straight in the eye and said in a whisper, "He tells me to say no." When I was 10, my family moved into an old house in a small town. The first night we moved in, I saw a dark figure in the mirror, the master bedroom behind me. It was a man in a wide-brimmed hat, but just a black silhouette. Secondly, almost every night while we lived there, everyone in the house had vivid nightmares. My little brother couldn't sleep because of the zombies in our room. The third, I had a bunk bed that was double on top and double on the bottom. One night, falling into a dead sleep, somehow, I flew off the upper bunk so hard that I landed a good 30 centimeters from the bed without touching the lower bunk, which also protruded 30 centimeters from the upper one. One morning, when we all woke up and went out to the kitchen, we found that the entire floor was covered with a whole carpet of maggots. They just had nowhere to go. We have not solved this vile riddle. Fifth, one morning, in the storeroom, we came across a whole mountain of lizard corpses, which somehow got in there and all died. This mountain stank a lot. Finally, the incident after which my mum said, "To hell with this sixth shit." There was a large building behind our house that used to be something like a large barn. We didn't use it because there was a giant beehive that took up almost the entire wall. I don't remember who saw it first, but a white blurry silhouette was seen in the window of this barn. It was a woman in an old traditional dress, with a scarf and an apron. She was looking to the left. We've seen everything. There were 4 of us and we just stared at her for a few minutes. Then, when one of us finally ventured outside and approached the barn, the woman disappeared from sight and was not found in the barn. In fact, there were a lot of terrible things happening in this house, but my brain just blocked out most of these incidents. But I remember enough to know that there's something wrong with this house. My house, which we bought, is haunted, and this is interesting because I am an astrophysicist by profession, and it was interesting from a scientific point of view to analyze the things that happened to me. In short, we love this ghost. I have probably the friendliest and most helpful ghost in the world. When we bought the house, we realized that it was haunted. Even more strangely, 3 days after we moved in, I realized that I had seen this house before in my dreams when we left the lights on. It turned on by itself. We even heard the click of a switch when 100% no one could physically be there and turn off the light. One day I heard someone walking in my son's room. Then, about 20 minutes later, I realized that I was completely alone in the house. I heard someone opening his door and walking around. Okay, it's creepy, but harmless if we lose something and say out loud that it's gone. After about half a day, we will find this item in the most visible place, on a table or sofa. We always say thank you. Our cats bend over and purr as if someone is stroking them. My daughter once said to my wife and me, "Thank you for coming to her at night and covering her with a blanket." My wife and I looked at each other and told her that we definitely hadn't visited her at night. And here's my favorite story. I have a friend who doesn't believe in ghosts. One day he came to visit us and stayed the night. Sitting by the fireplace in the evening, he said that all our stories about this ghost were complete nonsense. Then at night he goes to the guest room, goes to bed, and after about 20 minutes, he comes back to us with a bright red ear. He said that when he was half asleep, he heard a quiet movement and someone flicked his ear cruelly. He never said anything about our ghost again, but he also never stayed with us overnight. This was the only time this ghost showed aggression in our house, but I'm glad he's with us. Now he or she is part of our family. It would be creepy, strange and stupid. It didn't sound like it. My best childhood friend had a Rottweiler, Tyler, who passed away a few years before we started being friends. Once spent a night at his house and woke up in the middle of the night to a Rottweiler dog staring me right in the face. I thought it was his new Rottweiler Road, and so I decided to pet him, but my hand just went through him. I told my friend about it the next morning, and he said it was the norm. In this house, he constantly sees or hears his deceased dog. Since then, I have had several more paranormal cases, which has only strengthened my beliefs. I swear, I was hanging out with a ghost cat in the house where my grandmother moved in. When I was about 13 years old, she left the country, so I lived there for a few weeks. He was 2 houses away from mine, so it's okay. She didn't have any pets, but I kept seeing a grey tabby cat out of the corner of my eye. And one day I felt something jump on the bed and curl up next to me, but there was nothing there. It was a really pleasant presence. I saw him a few more times over the course of about 3 years when I visited, but when she got her own code, I stopped seeing this ghost. I still doubt that this is a real ghost. I've always had cats, so maybe my brain just makes me see them because I'm used to them. My aunt lived in an old house that was built before the Civil War. The upper floor created a really creepy atmosphere. It wasn't used, so no one had a reason to go up there. We often went on business with her, came back, and there were lights in every room upstairs. Mind you, she lived alone, so one night, she and I went up there to turn off the lights, and when we turned the corner down the steps, we saw an old man, and then he literally disappeared right before our eyes. My aunt and I got out of there as fast as we could. I didn't stay with her anymore until she left this house. One day I was sitting on the couch on the ground floor and I heard someone coming up the stairs loudly. The problem is that the stairs were on the other side of the room from where I heard it. The sound was as clear as day. I went upstairs and fell asleep on the floor of my parents' bedroom that night, which was very strange to me. The next morning, of course, my mom asks why I'm in their room with her, and I explained that I heard footsteps on the stairs in a place where there were no stairs, and her mouth opens wide. As it turned out, in 1989, they decided to redo this house a lot 10 years before we moved here. And in the very place where I heard those footsteps, there was indeed a staircase. I didn't want to believe my mom at first until we went upstairs. She showed me that there was a recess in the ceiling just where the wall separating the room from the stairs should have been. I didn't believe in anything like that before. I'm still sure I heard the AGI clearly. It reminds me of my own supernatural case. I woke up in the middle of the night, literally jumping out of bed and screaming, "There's someone here who you are." Not that I've heard or seen anything. I just woke up with a feeling I've never felt before or since. I felt very clearly that there was someone or something next to me. I could have put it all down to drowsiness or alcohol, but then I found out that a few years ago, a student died in this room due to an overdose. I still think that maybe it's just a coincidence, but every time I remember that feeling. It's probably too late for anyone to see this, but it's something that has always made me doubt. When my sister was a child, she always cried and stayed up all night, unless she was in bed with my mom, mine. My stepfather worked nights at the hospital, so he was not at home. When this happened, my mother told me that she woke up because she felt a hard, bony finger tapping on her shoulder. She woke up from this and realized that she had accidentally rolled onto my younger sister and almost strangled her to death. If she hadn't woken up, my sister would probably have died. Mum turned around in a panic, thinking that my stepfather had come home early and pushed her to wake Noah up. He wasn't there and wasn't there until the next morning. To this day, she swears that it was an angel who woke her up and saved my sister. My mom told me about a similar experience. When I was a child, she was a single mother and accidentally fell asleep on the couch while she was sitting with me. She says she felt something push her very hard and it woke her up. She woke up and found me playing with an outlet or something. When I was 20 or so, I worked in a carpet cleaning service. Actually, there were only 2 guys and me working there. Eventually I showed myself and they gave me a van and my own clients to work with. So one morning I'm heading to the Tennessee countryside to work. It was a private house. I talked to the middle-aged woman who owned it and started working, pulled out the equipment, connected to the water and so on. When I walked through this house to my place of work, I noticed that the woman I was talking to is hanging around in the kitchen, and her husband is working in the garage and in front of the entrance. There were no other people in the house, as far as I knew. I walked down the main hallway straight to the bedroom. As I was pushing the equipment into the room, I noticed out of the corner of my eye an elderly woman wearing a white dress. She gets up from a chair in the far right corner of the room. I look up to apologize and I see how she quickly goes behind the partition, near which this chair was standing. I did not see what was behind the partition, so I just thought she came out the door so I could finish the job. I brought the equipment in and decided to look behind this screen. I saw that there was no door. There was an ordinary bookcase there. My heart sank into my heels. I decided to finish the job as soon as possible and leave as soon as possible. Actually thinking about it, the ghost didn't seem aggressive or anything like that right now. In fact, he was very peaceful, just an old soul who hangs out in this house 15 years later. I still remember this old woman very, very clearly. Well, it happened when I was 6 and now I'm almost 50, so my memory is a little hazy. I had a friend the same age as me named Kelly. We hung out with other kids who lived in our neighborhood. One afternoon, Kelly knocked on my door. I answered and she asked if I could go with her to the corner store to buy bananas so we could make a milkshake. Before I could answer, my stepmother called me and said that I was I have to clean my room and I'm not going anywhere if I don't, Kelly. She shrugged and said she would go anyway, and that was the last time I saw her. Evening came and her mom started knocking on all the doors in search of her daughter. All the people of our neighborhood got together and went. It was getting darker and darker to look for her. When I went to bed, she still hadn't been found. Early in the morning, I heard a noise outside my bedroom window, something like an intermittent moan. When I looked out, I saw a policeman sitting against our wall and sobbing, and another policeman comforted him. I watched it for a while and then went downstairs. Later, I found out that Kelly was found dead in Rocha in front of our block. Later, it turned out that he was killed by one of the older boys who hung out with us. I had to testify the way I saw Kelly the day before. The police later reported that Kelly had been killed a few hours before she knocked on my door, and that I couldn't see her. At that time, she was already dead. The owner of the corner store said that Kelly never came to buy bananas at his place. I'm pretty sure the police thought I was lying, and that my mother was either lying too, or we heard something that really couldn't be. Thank you so much for watching. Watch the other videos on the channel, they are now on your screens. Go to my Discord server, write your stories there and they will be included in the video.